Together we could build a better bridge. It spans the breadth of stars, connecting me to you. Here's to you when the rain is too hard, when the battles that you fight just leave you scarred, when you're tired to the bone and you've got no strength to move on. Here's to you when the light has grown too dim and your faith is just hanging on a limb. Your heart begins to doubt if you'll ever make it through. Here's to you. Here's to you. When anger burns like fire beneath your skin, and you long for love, but you won't let love in. Your arms are folded tight across your chest, and you won't let go. Oh, fear rolls like thunder in your soul, and all the lies have got you under their control, and your mind is just too confused to see what is true. Oh, here's to you. Here's to you.
Good morning, everybody. How's it going? Getting myself adjusted here. Welcome to Watershed. It's so good to see each of you. I see some new faces. We're so glad you're here. Here we like you to come as you are. And we always start with singing together. This is this ritual that we participate in week to week to ground us to be with each other, to receive each other. So if you feel so inclined, you're welcome to stand, or if you're still grounding yourself, and we're going to sing some songs. Again, good morning.
Thank you so much for singing with us this morning. I want to give you an opportunity to greet the people around you, and then we will continue the morning.
unreserved, unrestrained. Your love is wild. Your love is wild for me. It isn't shy. It's unashamed. Your love is proud to be seen with me. You don't give your heart in pieces. You don't hide yourself to tease us. Uncontrolled, uncontained, your love is a fire burning bright for me. Not just a spark, not just a flame. Your love is a light, and all the world will see. Don't give your heart in pieces. You don't hide yourself to tease us. You don't give your heart in pieces. You don't hide yourself to please us. Your love's not fractured. It's not a troubled mind. It isn't anxious, not the restless kind. Your love's not passive. It's never disengaged. It's always present. It hangs on every word we say. Love keeps its promises. It keeps its word. Honors what's said. 'Cause its vows are good. Your love's not broken. It's not insecure. Your love's not selfish. Your love is pure. You don't give your heart in pieces. Oh.
Maybe you're here this morning and those words seem aspirational at best. Maybe you feel like that God is hiding from you, that God is withholding from you. Your experience might not ring true with these words. One of the reasons that we gather is so that we can remind each other. We can remind each other of God's love. When our experiences, when our life doesn't seem to make sense with these truths of God's love. So I want to sing this chorus one more time. I'm not sure what you need this morning, but take a few moments to allow yourself space to think, to feel, to breathe, to ask God, what do you need this morning? If you can't sing these words, let us sing it over you.
Give your heart in pieces. You don't hide yourself to tease us. You don't give your heart in pieces. You don't hide yourself to tease us.
Thank you for singing with us. You can be seated.
Well, good morning, Watershed. My name is Matt, and the role that I play here at Watershed is that of lead pastor. If you're brand new with us, I wasn't here last weekend. I was actually out of town. My wife ran her very first marathon, and something we both been training for the last 8 months. No, actually, this is my wife right here, Donna, if you're new with us, and I'm glad I'm able to do that. If you're brand new this morning, man, I cannot tell you how glad that I am that you're here. Not just because we enjoy when new people show up here at Watershed, but it feels like there's this groundswell of momentum that we've been experiencing together as a community really over the last 3 or 4 months. And so as you're finding your footing here, hopefully, as there's some traction that you experience, thank you for entrusting us with this time. Thank you for whatever time you might give us in the future as I'm going to kind of talk about some things for you to jump into. And man, if December was any sort of inclination as to what the new year is going to be, then we're in for a great time this year, this 2023. So let me just jump in real quick because there's a lot to tell you about. All of this should be on the screen at some point with QR codes and things of that nature. If you are a part of the Kindred community or you want to be a part of the planning session with Kindred. Kindred is our LGBTQ plus community here at Watershed. They're doing a planning meeting January 22nd, immediately after the service. They said, come one, come all. Anybody wants to show up, we'd love to have you. There's food. They're going to be reflecting on 2022, dreaming of 2023. So that's something you could jump into. February 5th we're kind of reintroducing something that we used to do prior to the pandemic. There's a time leading up to the pandemic where we would every year do a chili cook-off after church. And we meant to have Cedric Lundy, who was our teaching pastor last weekend, mention this. Kind of slipped through the cracks, but he has sort of the reputation of being the reigning champion, or at least that's how he remembers it. And he's already started talking a little bit of trash around, bring your best game, but just know like it's going to be hard to dethrone me. And so you're probably going to hear a little bit more from him in the weeks to come. But either way, there's a limited number of spots in terms of who wants to be in the competition. But we're actually doing chili and mac and cheese this year. Oh, really? That was that really struck a chord, huh?
Pills, y'all.
What's that?
Bring your lactate pills.
Yeah, and salt and hot sauce, right? That's happening February 5th, 11:30 to 1 p.m. Again, registration is limited, and everybody will be a judge. So this is a non-judgmental space, except for that day. Your job will be to judge harshly. All right. ICU Talks. We really take mental health seriously. We feel like that within the framework of the gospel, the good news is this idea that like what's under the surface and creating space for vulnerable conversations, safe and courageous conversations is really important. Kim Honeycutt, who is really low-keyed here at Watershed. Kim is the founder of this organization, this ministry, and on this particular night, January 21st, 6 p.m., is the first of 4 of these that we're going to be hosting this year. ICU Talks, it's called, and KJ Ramsey, who's a trauma-informed licensed therapist, is going to be the keynote speaker. Tickets are free, but you got to make sure you get them online. And I think at 5, there's kind of like a hangout kind of thing. 6, all right, 6. You did announcements last week, didn't you? Yeah. You did. Great. Yeah, thank you. We'll see. All right, moving right along. Did I miss anything there? Is anything else? I may proceed. Thank you. All right, so these next 2 things are kind of bundled together. One is called Reclamation, and it's sort of our Bible-ish study, theological deep dive that we do several times throughout the year. David Roberts is our pastor that oversees that and kind of teaches through it. That starts this Tuesday night, January 17th. There's been a little bit of confusion in terms of the time on the slide. It says 6:30. It's actually 6:45. And this is happening in conjunction. Well, before I go too far, the thing that David is going to be exploring in this pass is reclaiming practices. So things like baptism, communion, prayer, confession, so on and so forth. It's a bit of a surprise once you get there, but it's going to be those sorts of conversations. And it's going to be happening simultaneous to something called Preface. So if you're brand new, or if it's been a while since you've been through Preface, I would highly encourage, long for you to jump into this next one. It's 4 Tuesday nights in a row. Both of these environments are 4 Tuesday nights in a row. Preface is kind of this on-ramping experience here at Watershed. It's not a membership class. There's no like covenant that we slide across the table in this. It's more of a, hey, like you're coming from a particular set of experiences and theological and spiritual backgrounds. Can we have a conversation as you're entering into this space of what that's been like for you and how that begins to integrate with who we are and where we've come in the process? Because a lot there's a lot of change and evolution that Watershed has undergone over the last 17 or 18 years. I lead that environment. It is the absolute thing that I love the most in terms of my role here. And so would love to have you be a part of that. You can sign up in the QR codes, of course, and there's childcare for both of these events for birth through grades, through the 5th grade. So again, if you're brand new, if it's been a while, would love to have you be a part of that. Also, Derek Webb, who is if you grew up in sort of like the 90s and church was a part of your experience, you might remember a band called Caedmon's Call. Derek was a part of Caedmon's Call. He's gone through a lot of deconstruction and reconstruction, some language that we use here from time to time. And now through music and art, he kind of helps people process some things. He's a really powerful experience. There's limited space because it's a very intimate experience that he creates, but you have to have tickets, and we only have 20 spots left. So I want to make sure you know that. It's January 28th. Doors open at 7:30, and tickets are required. His upcoming album is called Jesus Hypothesis, which is a killer title. You don't want to miss it. And then finally, when we left on Christmas Eve, it's been really 3 weeks since I've been back with everyone. As we were moving through the last 2 or 3 months of the year, there was all this conversation around resources and a rising tide, and there need to be a rising tide in terms of financial resources at Watershed. And I hope this isn't oversharing, but as we were headed into the beginning of December, we were $68,000 behind in our budget. And we had a lot of folks who were saying, all right, there's a matching thing that we're willing to do. And about a week ago, we crunched all the numbers, figured out all the things that had come in, and we didn't recoup everything, but we came within $9,000 of recouping everything. Y'all, that is crazy. Someone reached out and said, hey, how did that pan out? And my only response was, this community crushed it, and you guys did. So I just want to say, again, thank you for taking resources so seriously here. Every month, we have a goal as a community to continue to get the tide to rise and to continue to maintain stability, health, and predictability in how we can do everything from launch initiatives, hire staff, resource community partnerships, and a whole bunch of other things. We have a goal of 5 new recurring families or households at least $100 a month or more each month. And so you guys, I don't know what was in the water last Sunday. It was Kim's announcements, clearly. Clearly it was Kim's announcements. So maybe I should let her talk about this. But we struggled in November, December to get 5 households each month. We're really out of the gate strong in January. I want to say thank you. If that's something you're willing to do or interested in doing, there's ways to do that. There's QR codes throughout the building. There's a box in the back. There's direct deposit if that's something you're interested in. You can. There's ways of accessing that through our website or come see me or one of the pastors here. Thank you. Great first 2 weeks of January, and I think the best is yet to come. Have a great morning.
So here we find ourselves, arms deep in the wishing well, holding the love that's ours. Steady we've kept our eye clear from the exit side, knowing that fear can feel like doubt. No point in staying safe. Just gets in the way. So let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Light 'em up, no turning around. No escape through the ashes now. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Light 'em up, no turning around. No escape through the ashes now. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down.
Darling, we celebrate through the smoke and the wild flames. Oh, in this heat feels like summer. And here I'll make my pledge, standing on the water's edge. I'm gonna swim, you'll have to pull me under.
No use in staying safe. Just gets in the way. So let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Light 'em up, no turning around. No escape through the ashes now. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Light 'em up, no turning around. No escape through the ashes now. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Light 'em up, they just get in the way. Strike a match anytime, it'll turn into flames. Say goodbye, I know I'll settle mine. The love that we keep is the shelter we find. Light 'em up, they just get in the way. Strike a match anytime, it'll turn into flame. Say goodbye, I know I'll settle mine. The love that we keep is the shelter we find.
So let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Light 'em up, no turning around. No escape through the ashes now. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Light 'em up, no turning around. No escape through the ashes now. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down. Let's burn the bridges down.
Good morning, Watershed. My name is Sean. It is a pleasure to be here with you this morning. This series is, I'm pretty sure, the longest running series in Watershed's history. It's gone by many, many names, but the heart of this series has always been, well, matters of the heart. Relationships of all kinds. And this year, we're focusing on tools that can help equip us to navigate relationships. Last week, Cedric talked about Marshall Rosenberg's work on nonviolent language as a tool to remaining present in relationship, how to observe and name your needs, how to feel seen, how to be connected with someone. But what if that someone isn't around anymore? The last 3-4 years have just been weird. I feel like they've been weird. I'm going to venture out and say that no one in this auditorium has lived through a pandemic previous to the one COVID-19 gifted us. But beyond learning how to live and thrive through a global pandemic, we've also seen a spike in racial and gender hate crimes. Between both of these, I'm going to call it cultural eras for lack of a better term, we've loved and we've lost. It seems, and this is without exaggeration, that everyone I know has physically lost someone during this pandemic. And in pandemic times, we have been forced to make difficult choices on how to mourn that death. Do we gather? Do you postpone a service? Do you hold one later? Do you just hold one for immediate family? In the midst of the pandemic, we could not lean on traditional ways of honoring death and grieving with loved ones. In the wake of this pandemic, I think that trauma is showing up in profound ways. Communal acts of mourning are important. The absence of them creates holes that are really hard to fill. And then there's a different kind of loss, the relationships we ended because we could no longer mend the broken bridge. We could not feel safe or understand the choices loved ones made. Some of us cut off family members or walked away from decades-long friendships. The Facebook rants bled over to the Thanksgiving meal tables, and that kind of loss requires mourning too. And in both cases, both losses are sustained without closure, without a sense of finality. And that, friends, is one of the most liminal spaces I know. It is an in-between place that is so hard to hold. 1 Corinthians 13:8 tells us that love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. But love endures, even after your person doesn't. My mother was an amazing human being. She was witty and kind and selfless and understanding. To others always, but not always to me. My mother was also mentally ill, and we had a strained relationship. And I love her dearly. And I always felt as though I could never measure up to her expectations. I disappointed her, and I was not a good enough Christian or daughter for her. And I know she loved me. But we had a lot of impasses, a lot of issues that we could not come to compromise on, and it made our relationship difficult. And there were moments of beauty, untouched by her illness. Moments when we were both our best selves. Moments where we embraced a third way of being, one that didn't require anger or shame or blame. Moments of agape love, the love Christ intended, the love of scriptures. And again, visiting the same chapter in 1 Corinthians, it's always the marriage ones, but I'm wanting to reframe this a little bit. We know true love is patient and kind. It doesn't envy or boast. It's not arrogant or rude. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but it rejoices with the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes and endures all things. My mother's death was quick. A diagnosis in late July and a death in early September. And because she lived in Costa Rica and I live here, we couldn't spend much time together. Thankfully, I was able to see her, first to prep her for chemo and to bolster my father for what we thought was going to be a long, hard road. Then 2 short weeks after that visit, I was on a plane again. This time I knew it was to say goodbye to my mother. Okay, so you know those movies? There's like this gut-wrenchingly beautiful but really hard scene, and the parent is asking for forgiveness. Please tell me that you guys, otherwise this is gonna fall flat. Okay, I need some affirmation. I was like, they're not, maybe it's the lights. I can't see you very well, but I freaked out for just a millisecond there. Okay, so we're in the movie, right? And it's like dark lighting, and that parent asks for forgiveness for all the awful things they did, and the adult child realizes their parent was just a victim of the traumas they sustained as a child. Okay, thank you for the nodding. There's low lighting, there's this big declaration, there's lots of tears, this loving goodbye, and there's closure. That did not happen, friends. I helped my mother into the back seat of the car, and we were taking her to the hospital. And I remember I said, "I love you." And she whispered back, "I love you too." And the next time I saw her, she was a catatonic person taking shallow breaths, unconscious, under a veil of morphine and other drugs. God, I am so thankful that our last words were, "I love you." But oh, the things that we left unsaid, which is pretty much how it went my entire adult relationship with her. Our relationship was far from perfect. In fact, while she was alive, I would say it was my single hardest relationship. It often felt like an open wound because I was continually hurt and disappointed by her. And I think she would probably say the same of me. And yet, what I would do to have her still alive in that complicated relationship. And here I am, a year and some change after her death, still reeling, still wondering how a world exists without her in a physical space. So, what closure, I ask? Surviving the loss of a relationship requires resilience. If you've ever lost someone or had to walk away from a deep and meaningful relationship, you've no doubt been in a painful crash course on resilience. Resilience is the essential ingredient that keeps the human spirit forward moving. Rebecca Sofer, I'm not sure, but she's the co-founder of Modern Loss, and she wrote the Modern Loss Handbook. And she says that resilience is the thing that enables you to experience post-traumatic growth, to recognize possibilities, and to find new sources of meaning along the long arc of loss. So here are some of the many iterations of loss we can experience, and this is not an exhaustive list, but you may have experienced a loss of job or career, an illness that you have to carry with you forward, and it changes who you were before, breakups or divorces or uncoupling, physical traumas, emotional traumas, loss of home, loss of safety, loss of a beloved pet, continual disappointments in relationships, death. Today, I want to walk us through some of Sofer's book, The Modern Loss Handbook, to address the loss of someone. And as I was sort of thinking about this and writing it all down, the title that kept coming to me was How to Love a Ghost. And if it wasn't just my mom that I kept conjuring up, but other lost relationships too, the ones where I left things unsaid. Now, I realize that a physical death and a metaphorical death are two different things, or maybe even beasts of completely different colors. But whether the person you loved and lost is dead or still alive, I believe that in both scenarios, the healing can look similar. But also, to be completely difficult and paradoxical, everyone's journey is both singular and different, which is to say that we all grieve differently. Still, I think that there are some basic tools that can help us, each in our own way, move toward healing and possibly even closure. I don't stop being my mother's daughter simply because my mother stopped being. Relationships continue on even if one person has moved into a different space. When someone dies or sever ties, you're still in relationship with them. You will continue to make meaning and nurture or not nurture that relationship as you move through the spectrum of loss. You're connected, and that doesn't change. Reflection becomes a powerful tool for healing. The past holds both beautiful memories that can sustain us and important memories that can teach us. Memories keep people alive in us, and I know that sounds really hallmarky, but I think it's nonetheless true, so just hang there for a second. The key, though, is to use the memories to instruct or to heal or to inform and not to be held back by those memories. So here's what I mean by that. I can hold on to a beautiful memory of my mother and know with certainty that I was deeply loved by her. This memory helps me gain reconciliation, closure, the love that I didn't always see from her, but I know is there, right? So that's a fond memory that I can hold on to. I can also interrogate a not so pleasant memory and study it through a detached lens as best I'm able, asking questions with empathy about why my mother did the thing that she did or reacted a certain way and how that made me feel. And again, that memory, albeit painful, helps me gain reconciliation and closure too. The secret is you have to detach yourself as best you're able to truly reflect on the person you lost. You can make some declarations about the relationship, and you don't have to own these declarations forever. You can reserve the right to change your mind. And likely, as you continue living and growing and evolving, you'll look back and make revisions to those declarations. This intentional work of remembering helps us reconcile with what was, especially if we still yearn for what could have been. The intentional work of remembering helps us own what happened to us. I struggle to name some truths around my mom. So Kim, you're not gonna shout? Kim, I was waiting for them. So Kim and I later are gonna be back on stage and we're gonna be talking about sort of forgiveness and letting go. So we've been prepping and having some conversations. And just hearing how Kim can state facts about her relationship and with her mother so easily, I'm like, oh, I have a lot of work left to do. And that's okay. So what I'm saying here is, if you're in that space where you're like, I don't think I can name the thing yet, it is okay. We are all works in progress, some of us more evolved than others, but it's fine. It's fine. So Kim, in that conversation, she mentioned the work of Byron Katie, speaker, author. She's famed for this method of self-inquiry, and it's simply called The Work. And it begins considering Who or what upsets you? So for our conversation today, I want you, if you feel comfortable, to think about the person that maybe you're seeking closure with. And maybe, if you're able, recall a specific memory or a situation with that person. And so there are going to be 4 questions here, right? This is what you need to ask yourself. Is it true? Is it true that my mother is disappointed in me? Can you absolutely know that it is true? How do you react, or what happens when you believe that thought? How do I react when I believe wholly that I'm a disappointment to my mother? And then who would I be without that thought? Interrogating these questions requires honest responses and awareness of the sensations in our bodies, of the feelings that come forward, and any behaviors that might arise. We confront how we treated the other person and how we treated ourselves, trying first to anchor in the memory and name our emotions. The last question allows us to reframe. It gives us an opportunity for a different outcome, and in some cases, frees us to let go and maybe even forgive. The work of naming the hard and the redeeming about my mother can still be done in her physical absence. The connection between us is still there, and our relationship continues even if it operates differently now. With grief as a major catalyst, I continue to evolve, and that shifts how I relate to my mother. I'm 43. Shock and awe, I know. I'm 43, and as my journey in parenthood continues to kind of move down the road, I am making new discoveries about my mom all the time. New moments where I consider what she might have endured at that same age, right? The teenage years are kind of looming ahead of me. The boys are 10, and I get glimpses. I'm nervous. You know the meal trains that they do when newborns happen? I'm gonna sign y'all all up for driving lessons because I have twins, and I just want to check out. I want to go somewhere for 2 weeks and come back and have responsible drivers. I think we can own that. There's a lot of you in this space. It would be like 15 minutes. Can we do it? So scared. I'm so scared, y'all. I'm scared. Anyway, digress. That's for my therapist probably. Anyway. My orientation to my mother, though, things that I didn't understand as I was a child, have come into focus when I reached her age in adulthood. I gained better clarity about her. So here's an example of what I mean. When I was young, I remember my mother was holding my hand in hers, and she turned our palms over, and she was like absentmindedly tracing the lifelines and the creases, and out of nowhere she said, "Soy negra, I'm black." And it caught me off guard. I don't know where her mind had been, but comparing her darker skin tone against my lighter one had triggered something for her. And I remember stumbling to find a way to soothe her, and I instinctively knew to her that association with being darker was not a good thing. Likely, it had something to do with the discrimination she faced as a young Latina immigrant in the United States. Of course, I didn't know that back then. But I knew instinctively that I had to refute that I had to make that statement right for her. So I remember scrambling, fumbling through my Spanish, and I think I said, "No, eres tan," like you're tan. There wasn't a word for tan I still don't know the word for tan. Anyway, I don't remember how old I was, except that we were on a mauve couch instead of a burgundy one. So that places me in elementary school. This is like the 80s and 90s. Those colors, right, were very signature colors in living rooms. Anyway, so flash forward, years forward, right? There's that memory of my mother and I that has come to the surface for me. And I'm a mom now, and one of my sons is sitting next to me on the couch, and our own hands are intertwined. And he's learning about the civil rights movement. He's learning about Martin Luther King, right? Appropriate. And he asked me, "Mom, why is your skin brown?" And y'all, I feel like I got punched in the stomach. My white son, very white, has noticed his mom's brownness. And again, I am scrambling to set it right. And probably with that memory of a young me and my own mother, somewhere in the subconscious of my mind, I begin to explain my brownness. And I'm a storyteller, so I launch into Costa Rica and macaws and tropical rainforests. And you come from the land of, you guys think I'm kidding, it went real performative. Like banana plantations and coffee and the iguanas, and I'm painting this beautiful origin story of my brownness. And he patiently, I think he's in Enneagram 2, he's just patiently listening, and he says, just simply, I wish my skin was brown too. And in that moment, I realized a few things. I realized I'm not my mom, and that my son has none of the trauma associated with being a brown body in a white world. My son doesn't have my mother's trauma of being a brown body in a white world, or my trauma of being a brown body in a white world. I was putting that on him. But it also brings that memory with my mother when I was a little girl into very sharp focus. And I begin to empathize with her in a way I wasn't able to before. And I can do that even though she's not here. In this way, we can continue learning about our person, and in doing so, we keep that connection alive. We can also imagine what might have been. What conversations might you have with your person if they were still around as you reach new milestones? What accomplishments would you share? What insights? There is nothing stopping you from writing these down or saying them aloud to your person. And maybe that act is freeing or healing. Maybe that act allows you to embody an experience with them, even if it's imperfect, because after all, every relationship is just that, imperfect. Of course, as we move through grief and tend to our loss, we encounter triggers. Those are landmines, right? We can work towards healing, we can work to forgive and release, and we can even come to peace with the loss of someone or of a relationship. But there will always, I think, be waves of grief that swallow us whole. Unseen triggers. Maybe it's a sense of nostalgia that bubbles up from nowhere, or an intense yearning that cripples, a rage that bubbles up, anger at a wound that refuses to heal. Anniversaries become landmines. Death dates, wedding anniversaries, birthdays, holidays. They all become marked in time by like the great before and after, right? In all caps there. Triggers pull us back in time viscerally. We feel it all again, as if for the first time. And I honestly don't know if this changes over time, but I do know that the way that we are feeling in those triggered moments is okay, no matter how many years or seasons pass. One way to navigate big days is to memorialize them. For special dates like anniversaries or birthdays, we can create rituals to help us honor and process loved ones that no longer exist in our physical orbits. Rituals have a structured nature to them, and it is this structure that offers us a sense of control. They help fill the void with something meaningful, and they can create sacred space. Consider biblical traditions and rituals: baptism, communion. These are hallowed rites, known in many church spaces as sacraments, and they provide ceremony and blessing. Soffer says this of rituals. She says, rituals create patterns of thinking, feeling, and doing that ground us in the world that we're in, even if our person is gone. And even if your person is still alive, consider how the performance of ritual allows you to reframe the relationship. Think about how empowering rituals can be in the narrative that we write. We get to choose how to honor that person, that relationship. We get to choose also how to enact practices of self-care that move us towards healing spaces. And again, give yourself permission to evolve those ritual practices over time as needed. Let them be solitary events or invite others to celebrate with you. Choose something that pays it forward or do something in total secrecy. You establish the terms. What rituals can you create to help provide healing and closure? Rituals help establish care for the soul. They help us through a triggering season, but of course, grief is all-encompassing, and it permeates everything. Profound loss leads to intense grief, and your emotional well-being is of paramount importance. And so what I'm saying gently is this: you need to tend to your mental health the way you do your physical one. And there's no shame in grief counseling. Bereavement policies in the United States suck. Oh, did you know that? They're terrible. It's like I don't know. I got off the plane on a Sunday and I was teaching class on a Monday. And that ended up being the right thing. I needed the distraction, but bereavement policies in the United States are a joke. Western culture conditions us to believe that we are meant to get to work as usual, right? Get back to the routine, to move on and bury our pain. And life continues on despite the aching hole. Kids, turns out they still need parenting. Work still needs to be completed. But hear me on this, you have to make time, and you have to reclaim what belongs to you. Take the time you need without apology, that part might be hard for some of us, and do the work. Do the work, or else I promise you a mental health crisis sits around the bend. For me, joining a grief group was a safe space to share my feelings vulnerably without fear of being misunderstood. Sitting in a room of people who were also in the throes of grief, whatever came out of my mouth was likely not going to be judged because I was among people who got it. They understood. My rage was appropriate, and I could share the ugly and not make it awkward. And I make everything awkward almost all the time. The freedom, though, to be unfiltered as I moved through various emotions was a gift. And while I wouldn't say I was wearing a mask 99% of the time, there is this performative aspect that occurs when you navigate grief. There's sort of this like unspoken expiration date when a community is like, she's good, right? We can move on. It's right around the time the meal train stops. Or people stop asking you how it's going, or when they do, I don't think they really want the real answer, right? I still cry myself to sleep, Larry. Thanks for asking. That's not going to happen at the water cooler. It's just not. So I say, yeah, I'm good. I'm doing, right? I don't know what else I'm supposed to say. Grief has no end date. It morphs over time, but I truly believe we don't stop grieving. This means that no matter where you are in your grief journey, you can always seek professional support. Do not forget that you have agency. Grief can be isolating, and it can be scary and lonely and hard and depressing, but it is also true that grief can open you up to authentic connection with others, connections that reach deeper and are ultimately more satisfying. My friendships with people who see me in my grief and have stayed true and patient with me as I navigate these waters has been a blessing I didn't know existed. My marriage has deepened in ways I never imagined. Some of my relationships are anchored now in a strong bedrock of trust and respect that colors everything else. Negotiating social networks and work is tricky after loss, for sure. And the work of healing requires setting boundaries. And boundaries are incredibly hard for me. And that's a large part due to my mom. In my childhood, I worked really hard to please others because my notions of being good were tied to serving others at a sacrifice of my own needs. I sacrificed boundaries. And so here we have reached the part of the program where you're supposed to do as I say and not as I do. I struggled to set boundaries. So in the counseling books that I'm turning to on this subject, for support, boundary setting is critically important. That's what the book says. I don't know yet. Stay tuned. But grief does often throw things off center. You're forced to confront mortality and the hard truth that there are some things that are just well beyond our control. In the midst of that ambiguity, boundaries help place safety gates around your heart. And here's the thing, you owe no one your grief story. Not significant others, not friends, not family. Be selective with the guardians of your grief. Choose people who will not make demands on your time, your process, or your sharing. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, Be gentle and kind to yourself in this journey. Dear ones, we carry our grief with us. It's at work, sitting on the desk next to our coffee, at dinner with our friends, sitting patiently in the booth beside us, at home, taking up space as we do laundry. Life is hard enough. Life in mourning is even harder. There will be days where it all feels pointless and mundane. There will be days when our bodies physically reject the notion of a daily schedule. There will be days when we cannot focus on a damn thing. Take time back. Maybe that's scaling back on your commitments. Maybe it's shutting down social media earlier in your day. Maybe it's taking breaks. But the work of honoring all the complex emotions, of grieving a messy, complex relationship, it is holy work. Go slow. Go earnestly. You tread on hollow ground. The Lord is in this work with you. So many lines of scripture point to this truth. If you just Google like scripture for grief, there's a ton. It's like, the cross-knit ones that you just put on towels and stuff. One of them is that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The God who knit you in the womb, who knows you thoroughly, sees you in the midst of your grief. I think about Jesus going to Bethany to see his beloved friend Lazarus. The gospel tells us that Jesus distinctly knew that Lazarus' illness would not lead to death, but rather to glory for God. A reading from the story of John would show us two sides of Jesus here then. The all-knowing, powerful deity that would use Lazarus' death to glorify God and foreshadow his own encounter with death and ultimate resurrection. But then there's also the human Jesus who is moved to tears. It says in one line of scripture, he wept. Even though he knew the rest of the story, even though he knew this death wasn't permanent, Jesus wept. He felt sorrow. He felt grief. And this tells me that grief is holy. This tells me not to fear grief, not to push it away, but to embrace it. And of course, death is not the end. Jesus' resurrection story teaches us that. That's a talk for a different Sunday. I would like to close us out tonight, in prayer, a prayer of affirmation. Safar ends her books with tenets, these truths she says that cannot be taken away. She calls it a grief manifesto, which I love. I've included some of those tenets in this prayer, but I thought maybe we should just start with a cleansing breath. So take a minute to come back to your body, situate yourself in a way that maybe feels comfortable for you. Maybe it's putting, both feet solidly on the ground. Just bring awareness to your body, to any sensations you might feel. Feel the flow of air entering and leaving your body. Scan for any tightness or pain. Acknowledge what you're feeling. Breathe deeply. God, you are perfect love. You are agape. God, you guide us to healing, to closure, to trust. In the safe harbor of your love, may we come to know that we have the right to create personal space around our grief, that we have the right to maintain boundaries around our grief, that we have the right to take the time we need in our grief. We have the right to prioritize our healing in this journey of grief. God, help us remember that we don't have to manage anyone's emotions but our own. Help us name the truths, however hard they may be, so that we can step into the light of healing. Help us seek the help we need and release us from any shame or any guilt. help us know that death is not the end. And let us be thankful for the small mercies that show up in the work of grief. Let us be thankful for the ways in which we are made new by grief. Amen.
God who was and is to come. You are holding us together. God who was and is to come. You are holding us together. God who and is to come, and you are holding us together. God who was and is to come. I invite you to stand as we close this morning, singing together of God's steadfast love. To catch a glimpse of your face, God, to captivate our gaze. Move us, come and remove what hinders us from drinking in your grace. God, we come with our hearts unfurled. God, we come with our hearts unfurled. Every morning your mercies new ones to meet us. Steadfast love. Every sunset your faithfulness all around us. Steadfast love, God. Open us like a bird's wings, so free, fettered by the past. Still us, Spirit, come fill us. Divine union unsurpassed. But God, we come with our hearts unfurled. God, we come with our hearts unfurled. Every morning your mercies do rise to meet us. Steadfast love. Every sunset your faithfulness all around us. Steadfast love of God. Regardless of where you find yourself this morning, there's a promise that God's mercies are new for us, that there's possibilities in love. And so again, like we did before, if you need this to be sung over you, just take a moment and let us sing. You are holding
say your faithfulness all around us. Steadfast love every morning, your mercies new rise to meet us. Steadfast love every sunset, your faithfulness all around us. Steadfast love, steadfast love, steadfast You are holding us together, God who was and is to come. You are holding us together, God who was and is to come. God, this morning as we spend some time in contemplation of resetting, God, may we be spurred towards hopefulness. May we see the possibilities that exist in love. May we find the courage to rely on one another, to let others sing for us when we can't, to embrace grace and hope and love and let it change us. And may what we've experienced here this morning go on into our weeks. May we find places where we can slow down, take some deep breaths, and be reminded of your love. We thank you, God, for these moments. May they move us and change us. In your name, amen. Thank you so much for being here this morning. We will see you next Sunday. Captivated by the splendor of your face, my secret place, I'm wide awake, drawing close, stirred by grace, and all my heart is yours. And all fear